is love on the Queer Family Podcast. Love is love.
I think by telling queer stories all the time and showing people that queer people are like fighting for their space and fighting to be themselves and fighting for the right to be themselves, I hope it shows that like you can be your own person, like whoever that is, right? Like you can be something that you've seen in the media, or you can be nothing anyone has ever seen before.
Welcome to the Queer Family Podcast, y'all. The show all about family, but with gay. I'm Jaimie, I'm your queer host, and this is the show that celebrates, highlights, uplifts, and normalizes LGBTQ plus families in all of our beautiful identities. And today we're shifting gears just slightly and focusing a little less on the queer family building and a little more on how we show up in the world, namely how the trans youth show up in the world. Just less than 20 days out from a very crucial presidential election, the 2024 election between Kamala Harris, the beautiful Kamala, and he who shall not be named, the orange ogre, is looming above us. And if you're anything like me, you're worried about it and scared and can't stop thinking about it. And to soothe yourself, you are incessantly and impulsively buying plants. Or bringing plants home, not even buying them, finding them on the street, making your wife crazy and your family crazy. Like if you're looking at the video, you will see I am surrounded by plants. And if you look outside this room, if you could, it's like a forest out there. I can't stop. This is how I am self-soothing. But I hope y'all, you know what, you're probably not like me and you're not buying plants, but whatever you're doing, I hope you're finding ways to self-soothe because it is a really a scary time for us. And so I'm really excited and happy that I got to sit down with Niko Lang. Niko is the mastermind behind the social media profile Queer News Daily, which is a wonderful resource for LGBTQIA plus folks and allies and just everyone. And Niko is also the author of the newly released book, American Teenager. This book is a really wonderful book that sheds light on the lives of trans kids across the country in a world that feels increasingly unstable, like with Italy's recent ban against surrogacy and the potential dangers of Project 2025. If the orange ogre wins, please don't let that happen. It's more important than ever, I think, to listen and support our youth. And I think Niko would agree. So I'm really excited to share this interview with you. I want to get right to rolling this tape. Just know that today is about honoring the strength of trans kids who show up in this scary world and continue to thrive. And don't forget to vote. And just don't forget to vote. And your voice is needed more now than ever, right? Let's go, Kamala. Anyway, okay, this has been a joy. I'm going to roll this tape. And I hope y'all have a great week. All right. Helen, Beulah, Nicole, Jerson, everybody, I'm bringing y'all with me. Let's roll this tape. Let's go, Niko. Let's go.
Queer Family Podcast. Love is love.
Hi, Niko.
Hi.
It is lovely having you here in person because as I was just saying, behind the scenes, I know nothing about you personally, but I know a lot about what you do online, but nothing about you.
I'm a person of mystery. What can I say?
You are, and you like it that way.
I do a little bit. I started out doing like confessional writing, and I got to this point where I basically just shared everything I wanted to share. And like circa, 2015, 2016, Trump was running for office. Things were getting really weird and scary. And I was like, the world doesn't need more of me sharing my problems. Like it was really about like talking about what's going on with other people.
Yeah.
So much of my platform since then has been like sharing the stories of other people and giving them like that like platform and that microphone.
I love it. You're doing a great service. You're doing the world a service. Also, we're going to dive into you a little bit too today because that's what I do. All right. Without further ado, so the listeners at home can know who we're talking to and what we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you your moment for your 30-second elevator pitch. Here we go. On your mark, get set. Go, Niko. Go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Niko Lang. I'm a longtime LGBTQ plus journalist, and today we will be talking about a book I wrote, American Teenager, in which I traveled the country for a year to profile the lives of 8 trans kids in 7 different U.S. states.
Boom. Love it. Amazing. That was 16 seconds, Niko.
New record.
You're a pro. It's one of the records. I'll tell you that much. All right. So, Niko, this is amazing. I read the book. Love it. I think more content like this needs to be out there. More books like this need to be out there because we need to normalize all of our identities, and we need to normalize especially trans kids who are under attack like crazy right now and seems like always. We also have to highlight the fact so that everybody knows, because I'm sure people follow you and don't know who you are. So you run the account on Instagram. That's where I follow you. You're probably in other places as well, called Queer News Daily, correct?
Yeah, Queer News Daily is my Instagram account, but I'm also, as I mentioned, my little tag, I'm a longtime queer journalist. I freelance just about everywhere. Like if you Google my name, I've been around the block in every conceivable way.
Before we get into American Teenager, your book, and why everybody needs to read it and bring it to all your people and all your friends and all your everybody, how did you get into queer journalism? How did you fall into that?
Yeah, like it was kind of an accident. In terms of like queer journalism, I still kind of fell into it in that, I graduated from college. I got a job doing like journalism, but it was at the time it was writing and editing op-eds for the site called The Daily Dot. And that was fun because it was like, I got to express my own opinion and I got to like say my piece, based on the issues of the day. Right. But around, as I hinted at before, around 2016, when Trump declared his intention to run for office and then did run for office and then was doing a lot better than we all thought he would. We just saw kind of all at once this really scary right-wing turn in ways that we didn't expect and didn't anticipate. And then I think people just kind of thought we were past. Like you look at like what happened with HB2 and anti-trans bathroom laws there. And a lot of folks looked at that as being an anomaly, that, this is just like, a couple wacky things that happened. It's not really indicative of a larger trend. It'll just go away if we like close our eyes and wait. But I just had a sense that wasn't true, that there was a real like animus toward trans people that we were starting to see and toward like LGBT folks more broadly that people were just being like shy about, right? That it wasn't that the hate had gone away. It's that like that people got better about hiding it, right? Or lying about it. And they would only tell people like in like phone surveys, right? But they wouldn't even tell their like closest friends that, actually I think that trans people have too many rights and we should really take some of them away.
And queers, like in general, LGBTQIA+, the whole alphabet. This is what people are secretly holding in or not telling their friends. And then, sorry, I interrupted. Keep going.
No, please. Totally fine. I come from a long line of interrupters, so you are totally welcome to. But nonetheless, with that, I just knew that we needed everybody engaged with that work as possible. I got like a job at the Advocate as their like East Coast, it was their East Coast reporter at the time, making like $42 an article, I figured out once. So, for me, it's just been remaining dedicated to that work and figuring out how to get better and better and also to go deeper. And with this book project, it was me figuring out how to do something on a deeper level than anything I'd ever done before, not just as a personal challenge for me, but because we really needed it. Like often the stories of these kids just aren't really told, right? And even if we're talking about issues affecting trans youth and their families and the people who love them, you often get to talk to the parents because they're just so scared about what could happen to their kids if their kids were to speak out, which is completely understandable. And as a parent, I would probably make the same decision. But it often just means that we just don't get those like kid voices at all. Like they're just erased in their own conversations about their lives. And with this book, I just really wanted to give that back to them. And that's really like where that started.
Yeah, I love that. And it also, we need that because then it shows the humanity and it shows that these people are actual human children who are experiencing this real marginalization and hatred, really, which is really effed up, right?
Yeah.
And I want to say also, I wanted to add to what you said, it felt like in 2016, there was this thing brewing and it was like underneath the surface, but it's not underneath the surface anymore. It is out and proud, all of this hatred. And that's what's been so eye-opening and scary in the last, how many years is that? 8 years? It's insane. and I talk about it a lot on this show. This show is supposed to be like light and heartwarming, and lately it's just been my poor listeners. I love y'all, but every intro I'm like, oh my God, and the country, and oh my God, and this, so. There needs to be more of this. It's really hard to get these stories out. It's so hard to get these stories out in the mainstream. So I appreciate you. Can I ask you, what is your connection to the queer community? Like, what is your story?
So I'm non-binary, so there's that. And I'm married to a man. Love him. Mm-hmm. Love him so much. He's gay, but I'm not. So, works out great. But there's the work I've been doing for such a long time. So that's part of it. I've been an LGBT journalist, depending on how one defines it, at some level for like 10 plus years. Before that, I was just a queer kid trying to figure themselves out in the world, I think, without like the same way that a lot of people are, right? And so much of my work, I think, comes from the fact that I grew up at a time in which I didn't really have elders or like much of a support system to figure things out. So I had to do a lot of that myself. And, you just end up making a lot of mistakes and just like blowing up your life again and again, which I pretty much spent like the first like 8 years of my adulthood doing, just continually blowing things up and making mistakes. Cause it's just like, I didn't know how to be like, I don't know.
Right.
Like,
yeah, because representation matters a lot, like, right? Representation, and you're being the representation. You're creating the representation with your queer news site and with your book and everything else you do.
Yeah, it's about like showing people that they exist. Absolutely. But I think for me, it's about like uplifting a multiplicity of voices that like growing up, that was kind of like you got like two queer people and you were like, I was this or this, you were given like you could be like, I don't know, like Sean Hayes or Ellen DeGeneres. And those were like your options, and it just seemed like there were so few ways of being in the world. And as somebody who had to figure out my like very particular identity, which isn't really like either of those people or like I think any of the queer people I've been presented to, like as like an option, like I had to sort of like carve out a space for myself. Like I think by telling queer stories all the time and showing people that queer people are like fighting for their space and fighting to be themselves and fighting for the right to be themselves, I hope it shows that like you can be your own person, like whoever that is, right? Like you can be something that you've seen in the media, or you can be nothing anyone has ever seen before. One of my favorite stories in the book is Augie, who is a non-binary kid in Florida, who that's like their entire goal. They like really idolize David Bowie and like this idea of being this like transformative alien creature. And their whole thing is they just want to be something that no one's ever seen. And that felt really cool to like just say, because I think it presents like a little bit of possibility for all of us. You can be something you've never seen before. Like you can be just like Renee Rapp if you want to, or you can be your own whatever you want to be. And I think that's great. That's like what queerness is to me.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And a quote that I recently heard that I really freaking love is, it's not impossible until somebody does it. Right. And so we need all those trailblazers. And I feel like the queer community, in particular, the young queer community, is really going to make a dent in changing things and opening up even more facets of humanity to all of us. And that's why this is all so important. And I wanted to focus on your private life a bit, because a lot of times these things that we create, like for instance, me, the podcast, it came out of a personal struggle that had to do with me trying to build my family as a gay woman and not being able, couldn't find the representation out there. So I just decided to create it. And I had a feeling you had a personal reason for why you have basically gone down the path that you've been on, like your whole adult life, it seems like, with what you're doing and what you're putting out there into the world.
It's weird. Yes and no. Of course, all this is personal because it's my community, right? These are like my friends. Like it's interesting because for journalists, you're not really supposed to be friends with like the people that you cover. But I just think like as queer people, there are so few of us that that's kind of impossible. So it's like, of course, I'm going to like fight for my people and like do what's right for them the same way I would want them to fight for me. But I think we often get, as writers, you're given this advice that you're supposed to write what you know, right? And that's like, that's the model, that you just like go out there and it's your story and you go write that. And I did that for a long time. I got bored with my own story, You you can only write what you know for so long before I got to a point in my 20s in which I was like, you know what? I want to write about people. Like, I want to write what I don't know. I want to write about people who have different experiences than me. Like, I want to fight for them in the same way that I want them to fight for me, you know? So much of my work is, I feel like, trying to expand outside of my own like limited worldview to find out like how other people experience the world. That's like, I think, been one of the really great things about my career, is that, you know, for a time, you know, when I worked for Into, which was a grinder property, I feel like I should throw like holy water when I say that. Google why if you want to know. Anyhow, I got to like trek off to Malaysia to interview members of the local queer community there about like battles they've been facing with the local government and just like navigating being a queer person and like Malay culture. And it was just such a like wonderful and transformative experience to get to like share space with these folks, eat the most amazing food I've ever had in my whole life, and just learn about how other people experience the world. We're often like boxed into these really limited confines. And just like, you know, we kind of get tunnel vision of like our daily realities and the people we know, right? But like the world is so much bigger than all of us. And I hope that my work reminds people of that. Like, I go to a Buddhist temple every Sunday, and, you know, part of Buddhism, right, is that you're supposed to gain like wisdom and compassion and use that wisdom and compassion to help people whenever possible. And it's really interesting because this weekend we had a little, you know, discussion about that, about like, what is the purpose of life and such. One of the teachers said that the purpose of life is to attain enlightenment. And that's part of like the goal of like helping people, right? Is you're supposed to attain enlightenment. But I never got the chance to question him afterward because he was a very busy man. But I wanted to ask him, isn't the goal of people just to help people? So for me, it's like, I do this because I can. I do this because I should be helping people. If I've got the resources and the platform and the skills, and I care about this and I care about other people, this is what I should be doing. Like, you know, sure, I think maybe some things I would have rather been doing, or like ways I saw my life going, you know what I mean? But this is the thing that's more important. Like, if I can do anything while I'm here on this earth, the limited time we have, I just want to help as many as people as possible.
And love that. That's great. And also, yes, you're telling other stories, and you are also keeping it under this queer umbrella, which I love. And I think that was kind of what I was getting at there. It's just, you know, keeping the focus on the queer community, which there's just not enough of that. And I think that more resources and books and podcasts and news stations should be focused on the queer community as well.
I will say, just so that way I'm not totally evasive, I do think I get to tell aspects of my own story through other people. And that always feels really rewarding, right? In this book, you know, I grew up, as I mentioned, I grew up really poor. One of the families was like experiencing homelessness. You know, another family was in like, the student is this like Black biracial kid in like rural Appalachia who grew up in a really similar way to me, that even though we're really different, there's so much of like my own journey that I see in Micah, to where sometimes it's really painful because it just reminds you so much of what you were like at 17 and what you were experiencing. You know, you get like this like flashback. And then in the Illinois chapter in the book, you know, that chapter is about a Muslim Pakistani family, you know, who on paper has a really, really different life experience than I do. You know, I grew up being raised Catholic in the grand tradition of being raised Catholic. I do not identify as Catholic as an adult, but, you know, like there's so much of their story that's about intergenerational trauma and about intergenerational struggle, and not to do with their kid's Muslim identity. It's to do with with his mom and the fact that she's a very like free-spirited, liberated woman who wants to live life on her own terms, and her parents don't really accept that. And, you know, there's been an interesting thing to wrap her mind around, that they've been so supportive of her kid, you know, of their grandson, but they haven't been supportive of her. And it's not like she like hates her kid for that, or she's like jealous or something. It's just that there's like a grieving that she's had to go through in order to go on this journey with him, because it's like grieving for her own story and for like the acceptance she never got. And that's so rich and complex. And I'd never gotten to tell this story like that before. But it also felt like in some way I got to tell my own story of like having a difficult time with my family about everything else other than the queerness. Like, they're all Democrats, so that part's really nice. But we argue about everything else other than politics. Like, my aunt and my grandmother once got in a 9-month fight over a freaking hamburger. They hate when I tell that story, but it's true. And I felt like, this family who sort of has a similar thing where there's so much they have to hammer out and hash out, but none of it has to do really with like the kid's transness. That was really cool because I've always kind of wanted to tell my family's story a little bit in like certain aspects, but I know they get really mad and it's not worth the drama. So it's like it's like I got to do that anyway. It's like you sneak in through the back door.
Yeah, I'm always careful when I'm mentioning my family as well. Good. Like me, I'm an open book. I'll tell you anything. But if we're going to delve into my family, I have to tread carefully. I understand. But what struck me about these stories in the book, these folks and their lives, was that one of the things that struck me was that all of the parents in the book are extremely supportive of their children and trying to do what's best for them and worried about them, of course, and trying to do right by them in the best way that they can, which is heartwarming to read and hear. I thought that was special, to be honest.
It's interesting because I almost I hate to devil's advocate or like counter that, but I think it's more complicated than that. Like, sure, all the parents are really supportive, and I think that that's really important. But I think one of the things I really loved is showing the shading there, and the nuance and the gray areas that so many of these parents are really supportive, but they don't know how to be. Like they love their kids, right? Unconditionally love their kids, and they would do anything for their kids. But like some of them struggle with things like pronouns, like getting the right words. Like Dawn, so Dawn and Micah, that's the third chapter, our rural Appalachia chapter. They're in the suburbs of like Charleston, West Virginia. It was so fascinating because, the mom, Dawn, is a white lesbian who's like in her 50s. She might cream pie me for saying that, but she is.
And that was interesting when I found out she was a lesbian too, because I was not expecting that at all.
I know. And I love
midway.
that. I love those surprises, right? But then for her, she has this sort of idea of like her own journey and how she came into the world and reconciling that with like Micah's journey and the fact that like they've chosen a different path that she doesn't entirely understand. She's still working all this stuff out for her. Like that she always forgets to use the right pronouns. I do not think she understands gender fluidity at all. She's tried to do the work and she's trying to like educate herself, but it's just kind of not clicking. It's like, it's kind of like when I tried to take Arabic and it just like Arabic's a really hard language and I could not learn Arabic to like save my life. But it's for her, it's like she's trying to do the work. It's just not sinking in. And part of that also has to do with like she has brain trauma from she had this horrible accident that she was in. So there's just all of these different factors that add up, right? And sure, like I think people might like make judgments or like project things onto her, but this is what life is, People are complicated creatures, like, and trans kids live in complicated circumstances. They have complicated families. And I think sometimes we like to pretend that things are just like black and white because it's just an easier story to tell. That there are some parents who reject their kids and there are some parents who love their kids and are like perfect with pronouns. But even the perfect parents still get stuff wrong. Like I got like, I get misgendered by like perfect parents all the time. And then they screw up and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like I meant to use they, them pronouns. I just like forgot. And I'm like, that's totally great. You're doing the work. That's lovely. And not to like bring, this back to Buddhism, but I probably will like 5 more times. Sorry about that, listeners. But like, there's this thing I learned a few weeks ago that I really loved, which is that trying increases karma. So that like trying in itself is beautiful. It's a good like act to engage in, like a good practice. And trying can't be the whole thing, right? Like you can't be trying and like screwing up forever. Like at some point there's got to be some accountability here. But in the moment right now, if you want to learn and your intention is to keep learning and growing, that's a really good place to start. And I think I wanted so much to just inject good faith back into like complicated conversations. So for me, it was about starting with like that good faith again of like you're trying. And I affirm you for that.
Well, I think that's what's shown through to me, honestly. Shown through. I think that's what came through is these parents had the best intentions, right? They really were trying, it seemed to me like. And I think also it's interesting because, and I'm just realizing this, I think that I look through things at this point through the lens of a parent, which is crazy to me. Like, also realizing that all parents, we're just humans and we're messing up all the freaking time and we're trying and all the things. But I'm just realizing that I read this. Wow, that's like huge to me. I read that, which is weird because I'm a mess as a parent, but read that from the perspective of a parent and was finding myself, just trying to see the good in the parents. Oh my God, they're accepting, yay, good. Okay, this is what we need. And okay, I understand how this parents things and I understand, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So that's interesting. I don't know. I just had a aha moment. I'm like a real parent out in this world. It only took about 11 years, but here we are.
Yeah, and I will give you something. I'll give you something personal because we wanted to get personal here.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep trying.
Yeah, you'll keep
Isn't that
opening
we
that
just
pickle jar, right?
there's that try. I am getting karma points.
So many.
I'm gonna keep trying, Niko.
I think one of the reasons that I was so charmed by how hard these parents wanted to get it and wanted to learn, even if they were like screwing up, is because, my parents in a lot of ways are really lovely. My mom is like no longer with us, unfortunately. My dad and I don't talk anymore because I decided that relationship wasn't really a good, healthy relationship for me. And I gave him a lot of tips to change and he kind of didn't take those. And the problem with my father is that he never tried. And that's always been his like fatal flaw, is that he knows what his problems are and he knows what he could do to be better and he just doesn't do it. And he has all these people in his life again and again and again telling him like, you need to change, and he's been through so much trauma in his life. And I get it. Like, I get why, how he ended up this way. My parents were very unlucky. They had 2 other children who weren't me, who died. Oh. And it was a horrible situation for both of them. We were basically like, when I grew up, the family that bad things happened to, right? Because we just had this string of horrible misfortune that I would never wish on anyone, right? So I know that those factors made my father the reclusive, introverted, just fortress of feelings where you can never really get in. He doesn't share what's going on with him. He doesn't really say, I love you. He's just a really big mystery to everyone around him. If I'm a mystery to my followers a little bit, my dad is a mystery to even the people who know him really well. The other day I was struggling to come up with 10 facts about my father and I just couldn't. I was who knows?
Yeah.
For these parents, I saw so much of that trying, right? I saw so much of that wanting to be better and, wanting to be a better advocate for these kids. And that's what I wish I had for my own parent, That's more than anything, that would have meant so much to me just to see my dad trying, not in the queer way, because he's surprisingly okay about that. He doesn't really get it necessarily. But
okay, that's what I was going to ask you. Was it surrounding the queerness?
He's garden variety homophobic in the same way that I think a lot of Gen X dudes are. You know what I mean? There's nothing special about my father's homophobia. It's not very interesting.
Right.
And it's one of those things, if called on it, he'd probably just apologize and be like, oh, sorry. And it's there's just nothing deep there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But, in all the other ways, that's the work he really needs to do. And it's just never going to happen. So seeing these families who are willing to do that for their kids really moved me. And I hope it moves people who read the book, to see that parents can do this. Maybe if you don't have that for yourself, it might be nice to see it in other people. And for parents who maybe are struggling with trying, right? Who might be like my father, right? And or just, why try or beat themselves up when they get it wrong. I just hope it's a reminder to keep going.
We're talking about the parents here, and this is not to take away from these teenagers who let you trail them and tell their stories and really open their lives up to you to show you who they were and who they wanted to be and what their dreams were and what they were working towards and how hard it can be and how discouraging just life can be in general as a teenager in general. And then you add some stuff the government trying to take away your rights and boom, we got that's hard. That's really hard to be a teenager like that. Right. Yeah. So not to take away from that. And you do learn hear some really compelling narratives about these kids who are really just trying to live their lives and figure themselves out like every teenager with some added obstacles. But to take it back to the parents, the one that struck me the most.
You're not to talk about the parents too much, but to talk about the parents. I'm teasing. We're good.
The last story in the book in California. I'm originally from California. I live in New York City though, but I have a strong tie to California and liberal and la, 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 la. And reading that last story, 2 things struck me. So it kind of really a lot focused on this mother because the teenager wasn't really as into like being out and proud as the mom was. And it really struck me because I'm a gay mom. I have this podcast, and I'm all the time advocating for queer families and 2-mom families and 2-dad families and all the families, trans families, non-binary families, polyamorous families, you know, and I'm loud about it. And I want my kids to be loud about it. And, you know, like, for instance, like my daughter just started middle school, 6th grade. Over the summer, their homework assignment was to write a letter to another student when you get there about yourself. And Rose, my daughter, was like, I don't have anything to write. What am I going to write? And of course, I'm like, well, there's one really glaring thing here that you could like expand on if you wanted to. And her response was, I want to get to know people first. I don't want that to be the first thing they know about me. And it jarred me for a second. And I was like, oh, right. I'm pushing this on my kids and not thinking about their experience of it. Do you know? And that resonated with me in that last story, and that the mother is doing everything, and her, like, she really cares and is like really doing great stuff. But also it felt like they weren't in alignment, she and her kiddo. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that struck me. There were a couple aha moments in here when I was like, oh, I need to back off a little bit with my out and proud shiznit. You know, I like to use the technical terms in this little podcast. But also what struck me was the fact, and this is also my lived experience right now as well. I live in a liberal bubble, NYC. I'm from San Francisco, liberal bubble. And when she was talking about how these anti-trans bills are coming there, they are also coming here. They have reached my little community. I live in Chelsea, like right next to Chelsea. My kids go to school in Chelsea. And some anti-trans bills have seeped into this community as well. And that is a really important message, I think, to get across. To your point in the beginning, when you said, you know, in 2016, this thing started brewing and brewing and brewing, and it's growing and growing. And yeah, it is. It's really freaking growing, and it's scary. Because if it's reaching Chelsea, where the modern day gay civil rights movement like happened, and these liberal California towns and all these liberal places, that means this shiznit is really, really like spreading like wildfire, and it's really freaking scary.
Yeah. And for me, it was really interesting to look at that through the vantage point of these kids, because you have so many kids who feel really motivated to get out and do something about it.
Yes.
Right? That they're like, you know, they're on the front lines, they're organizing, you know, they're being really incredibly brave and courageous. Micah, right? You know, Wyatt in the first chapter, who's had his entire childhood to this stuff, right? And he's like, where is my childhood gone? You know, I've been doing this for so long. I should just get to have like space to be myself. You know, he just went off to college, and we keep in touch every day. We just talked over the phone yesterday, and he's still figuring out like, what does it mean to be a teenager? What does it mean to be a young person? Because he's had so little space to do that. Like, he just got a boyfriend, which good for him. Congratulations for Wyatt.
Go ahead, Wyatt.
Yeah, they're so happy. But nonetheless, he's figuring out how to do that, and to just like he'll sometimes text me. He's like, I'm going to like, you know, do something like silly and fun this weekend. Is that okay? He looks for permission from me as somebody. I think he views me as like an older sibling now, which I'll take. Have very older sibling energy. But he's often just looking for permission to be like a dumb young person who has like dumb young experiences, right? And I got so much of that when I was a kid. I had nothing but that. Right. But for him, you know, it's still foreign and alien. And then you go from that extreme, right, where it's like, I don't even know how to be a kid, to Kylie in the last chapter, who just wants to be a kid and doesn't want to do any of this stuff. She has no interest in activism or advocacy, even though her mom is, you know, this incredible mom who is super on the front lines and is doing all this stuff and is very much like super mom of like not only taking care of herself and her kids, but like everyone around her. Like, you know, they're doing local fish fries and stuff for like the community, like regularly, right? These are people who are on the ball, and they're just used to organizing for everybody. But like, part of the thing of having a kid, right? And I think any parent can relate to this, is that you are going to want things for yourself that your child will not want for themselves, right? That the life you choose isn't going to be the life they choose, choose, right? And for Janet, that's the mom, I think there's been like a little bit of a struggle there because she does want so much like for her daughter to be celebrated and for, other people to like celebrate her. And she's been fighting for that for such a long time that the idea that her daughter doesn't want that for herself, to do that same work, it almost feels like a little bit of a rejection in some way, or at least it has historically. And I know she's been really working on it, right? That was part of the process of like their chapter in the book was letting go of that idea that like Kylie would need to do activism and recognizing for herself that because Janet did such a good job, right, and thinking about this like her daughter and all the things that she would need to thrive, that like Kylie then has a privilege to not have to do anything, for herself, to not have to do any of that stuff in a way that's like a credit to her. But like I think trying to recognize that, who's been doing the work for so long, trying to get her to like pause and take a break and just like reflect on like the beautiful work that's been done is really hard.
It's really hard. And that's also that's the number one lesson that you get in parenting on a micro level, right? Like in every little instance, like your kids are your kids. They are their own individuals. And you learn this lesson every single freaking day with these a-hole kids. Like, excuse me.
It's true. Like, I mean, it's true though. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That's on a micro level, every little thing. On a macro level, when you think of that, the big picture like that, and how this work has really become Janet's life.
Yeah.
And her kid's not sharing in that, but yay, good. Also, it's hard. And that's on a much more macro level. But also just to bring in this devil's advocate thing, who knows if Kylie is going to need to fight at some point because of the rhetoric that is spreading like wildfire, even to communities like Kylie's, where she's been completely 100% loved and accepted. And it's crazy. It's really crazy.
But the thing is with Kylie, she's never going to do it. Like, even if that hate came on her front doorstep, she would still be like, this is not for me. And I loved in the book getting to carve out space for that, for these kids to just like not be activists. Because I've never really heard kids talk about that before. All of the kids, for the most part, that I do get the chance to interview are really into advocacy, right? That's like, it's, or else I think I wouldn't have the chance to talk to them, right?
Right.
And that like I am doing stories about people doing activism. If people don't want to be activists, they're not going to be like, I've got to call Niko Lang to tell my story, right? That's just not going to happen. And for here, I wanted to tell so many stories that I'd never heard before, right? Whether like that's a Muslim Pakistani story, whether that's, a biracial Black teenager in Appalachia, whether that's like a Puerto Rican family in Alabama. There were just all of these like cool intersections I felt like I really got to explore, and just new narratives that I, as a journalist, I like a challenge, right? I like to keep, expanding my horizons and things I'd never gotten to explore and talk about. But part of that for me was kids who just choose a different path for themselves in terms of activism and advocacy. And they should get the chance to do that, right? It really stinks that all these kids are being forced to give up their childhoods to this stuff because they shouldn't have to do it. And they shouldn't be forced to do it. So like,
and it's not fair.
It's not fair.
Yeah.
And for these kids, like to be able to take a step back and say, this isn't what I want for myself. That's what we should want for all of our kids, right?
Right.
All of our kids should have that privilege. And it's really interesting because when I was visiting the Muslim family in Illinois, we had such a great time and we had like the best food ever and just really fascinating conversations. And they're also just so like warm and loving and cool. And the dad asked me, because, he's kind of a writer. So he was already thinking 5D chess and like, how is this going to be laid out? And he's like, oh, are we going to be the chapter of like, this is how America should be? Like, and I said, no, I'm sorry. You guys are like the religious chapter, because there were just so many, like, there was so much there. I felt like in terms of his worldview and the way he saw the world, that felt like it would be a disservice to frame it as anything else other than a faith story, because it's a story about like how his faith is more important to him actually than being trans. And that felt really like interesting and like, and how do you say, thorny. And there was just so many like complexities there that I felt like I loved exploring. But then for the family, the last chapter, I loved that they got to be the family of like, this is how life should be. And that kids should get to make any decision they want, right? For themselves and their lives.
And also, parents shouldn't feel like they have to advocate so hard for their children. right? It should just be, yeah, that's my kiddo being an asshole, like literally,
Yeah.
because that's what they do. Yeah, I agree. And the Muslim chapter, I can't remember anybody's name ever. So this is not anything against the book or any. I just don't know names, but
Yeah, there are a lot of names in this book. If you are not
and there
speaking
are
names, then
yeah,
beware.
there are a lot of names. But it did strike me too how just there didn't seem to be any issue in the mosque surrounding the transness. Like it didn't seem to me like there had ever been an issue, and maybe I'm wrong there, but that's just an interesting take because when you think of religion, you don't think of that. Honestly, I don't, and I don't do religion at all on any level for reasons like that. But yeah, that was a takeaway for me too. That the kiddo was just totally like accepted at the like was in the other room to begin with, and then transitioned and like warmly welcomed into the other room. You know what I mean? Because, but if listeners at home, it's separate between men and women when you worship in a mosque. That was kind of beautiful to hear that it was so easy, that aspect.
I feel like we often treat all stories of like religion as being kind of the same, that it's always like rejection. And, it's always about people being kicked out of their church or like having this like brokenness that they have to then like heal from.
Those are the juicy stories, Niko. Those are the juicy ones.
If it bleeds, it leads. That's, that's the way it goes. But there are so many people like, and there are those kinds of stories in the book. Like Wyatt's family does have a really difficult history with religion, and they are still like healing from that, right? But then you have other stories that counterbalance that too and provide like different perspectives. Like for, Micah's family, they're sort of in between where it's like, Dawn grew up this like specific way in the church and she's not going to those kinds of like religious spaces anymore. And she's sort of figuring out like, what does God mean to her? Does he love her, just as she is? Does he love her child just as they are? Right. And those are still questions that she's dealing with. But then you have other families like Clint's family is a great example. But then in Texas, our family there, I'm always like, there are so many like nuances. It's Episcopalian evangelical. I sometimes get confused about denominations, but they're Episcopalian evangelical. And when they pitched me on being part of the book, they're sort of like what they wanted their chapter to be was kind of like the TV show Schitt's Creek, which I worked into the chapter because I knew that they would like that. And that Schitt's Creek is about this small town in Canada where homophobia doesn't exist, where like David Rose can like get a boyfriend and run the little apothecary in the town square, and it's never going to come up that he's pansexual, right?
Just like red and white wine. There we go.
Exactly. But like, and it just never comes up in the show. It's not part of the narrative. And for them, their story, of Ruby, their daughter, coming out, being affirmed as trans in the church, having her like coming out party at the church was also one where she hadn't experienced any rejection whatsoever. And for me, that was just really refreshing because I'm going to say this so many times. I'd never heard that story before. And stories you haven't heard before are very important because they can add a weight or like a counterbalance to like all of the just like the shame and the trauma that's out there. Because I think a lot of folks don't even realize that you can be affirmed in a church or that there could be a religious space out there that loves you for who you are. And like, God, don't we all need to be reminded of that? Like, even as someone who's experienced that in my own life, I go to a religious space once a week. I go meditate every Sunday at my Buddhist temple. I still have all of this like animosity toward religion, or not animosity, that's not the right word, but I just kind of like tense up a little bit, when I see like, if I drive past like a church, there's always a little part of me that's on guard because I know things that have happened to me or things that have happened to my friends, right? And you don't forget that. Like the body keeps the score, right? That stays in you forever. And for folks who still have that in them, that pain from religious spaces, like we need to get like as many stories of love and affirmation as possible. Because it's like there's this saying that for every negative message, you need like 10 positive messages to outweigh that. And it's like, this is just one positive message. We need so many more to negate all of that hate we've been getting our entire lives.
Right. And then maybe it will spread like wildfire, like the bad rhetoric, but in the good way. Right? Like it's not impossible until someone does it. And then all of a sudden that's possible. Oh, we can welcome everyone. Right? Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good point.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's why, that's literally why I do this podcast, because I want to uplift our families, the differences, the beauties, all the different nuances of our wonderfully queer families in all of our forms. And so that's why it's important that this book exists and everybody should go read it and share it with everybody you know, even the folks who you think are homophobes. Even better, share it with them.
I mean, there are people who need to read it first. And I do hope that, because so much of the book isn't caught up in like political conversations or just like, I don't want to say the minutia because that sounds dismissive, but like there are all of these things that like hold Republicans and conservatives back from affirming trans people. And there's these questions about what pronouns do I use? Well, what does your medical care look like? What's going on down there? Just like these things that trip us up. And we often just forget to like look at people as human and to affirm each other's humanity. And
humanity.
So this book is just about affirming their humanity, that it's about saying we can get to all those conversations later about like medical care. That's important. About like what sports teams should they play on. That's important. That's later. We need to start with seeing these kids as people, because we have forgotten that they're people. And if you're ever going to get anywhere, we need to tell them that they're beautiful and they're loved. And it needs to start there before we like talk about anything else.
Yeah, they're beautiful and they're loved. The most important thing is to save some lives here. We're literally saving lives. You're saving lives. This has been really lovely. Please, Niko, tell everybody all the places they can find you and where they can find your book and where you would prefer that they purchase the book and all the things.
Perfect. You can only find me in one place on the internet on purpose. That is Queer News Daily. Do not find me anywhere else, please. But that is my Instagram account. It's where I post. I've been taking a little bit of a break just because I needed to. Well, I was getting some like harassment online. That wasn't fun. And I'm also releasing a book, and that's really stressful. So I just like put a pause on it because I was like, I just can't do all this at the same time. Sorry, everyone. But as of today, we are back. I will be posting my first post in quite a while later today. So enjoy my op art designs. They're great. At least I hope you like them. I spent a lot of time on them, so please like them. But then on top of the Queer News Daily, for this book, for the purposes of this very important book that you should buy, you can get it if you're an online girly. The easiest place is probably bookshop.org. I know a lot of folks use things like Amazon, but please don't. I'm a little bit of a Barnes & Noble stan because I love Barnes & Noble. I grew up at a Barnes & Noble. I know it seems evil corporate, but they are an underdog these days because there are only two of them around. So I got to stump my Barnes & Noble. But then also check out your local bookstore too.
Thank you so much, Niko. This has been great. Anything else you wanted to add?
Be nice to people online. I'll second that. We all just need to be like kinder to each other in general. And I hope this book reminds people of the power of kindness, because we really need to be nice to these kids. And we, for some reason, are not right now. Life is very hard for them. So I hope for all of us, like, we just ask what we can do to make it easier. Obviously, buying this book is a start, in some really small way, but it's only a very small way. Like, we've got to get engaged in our local communities. You've got to get out there. You've got to like volunteer, donate to your local LGBT center, donate some books, donate this book to your local LGBT center. Go out and vote. There is an election coming up in which these kids' rights are on the ballot. We need to go out and vote like their lives depend on it, because they do.
Because they do. Yeah, exactly. 100%. I will second and third and fourth that. Let's go. Let's go. It's time. Let's go.
LFG.
Yes. This has been great, Niko. I'm so glad to get to know you.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for having me on.
This has been great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Queer Family Podcast.
Whew. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, feel free to listen to another or watch another. I have so many episodes for your listening or viewing pleasure. Just go pick one and enjoy. There's a lot. There really is. And also, if you really do like this show, please, I know I say it all the time, but please do consider supporting the show on Patreon. You're just going to go to patreon.com/The Queer Family Podcast. You're going to pick a tier, you're going to join, and you're going to get that bonus content. And you're also going to get my love and adoration for the rest of my life. I love you all. Thanks for tuning in. Keep on tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Mwah.